Hello, everyone, and welcome to LA Currents. I'm Anita Bennett. The homelessness crisis here in Los Angeles continues to make headlines, and lately it's been stirring even more debate. Joining me now to discuss this issue is Reverend Andy Bales. You are the CEO of the Union Rescue Mission. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Anita.
So let's start by talking about the pandemic. How has that affected the homeless population at the mission?
Overall, the pandemic, I think, added, unfortunately, 20,000 people to our streets. But at the mission, it hit us really hard. We had to decompress. In other words, we went from about 1,250 under our roof to down to about 280. And then began to rebuild.
The shelter is located on Skid Row.
Right in the heart of Skid Row, always has been for 131 years in Los Angeles.
How closely do you work with the city government in terms of getting those services to the people that need them?
We coordinate with the city. We don't accept any funding. Funding from the city or county requires a harm reduction policy where alcohol and drugs are free to flow, and we believe completely in recovery. So we do not take any city or county funding because of our focus on recovery.
In terms of decentralization, I talk to so many people, and people don't want those services in their neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So how do you balance the needs of the unhoused with the residents, the renters, the homeowners?
We believe in decentralizing, so we were successfully able to overcome neighborhood opposition. Let me just put it that way. We finally overcame, and we moved into Hope Gardens, transitional housing for single moms with kids, and senior housing, permanent supportive housing for seniors. And the neighbors now love us. One neighbor went from saying we were going to be a human trash heap to now coming to tears and saying, if those moms and kids weren't here, I don't know where they would be. So total heart change by the neighborhood. We assured them of good management, that it would be all about recovery and not a free flow of alcohol and drugs. And we were welcomed. So I believe with good management, good security, we can overcome NIMBY and have YIMBY start to happen in NIMBY. Even our city.
Not in my backyard,
right.
NIMBY. What are your thoughts on some of the cabin communities and other supportive housing opening across Los Angeles? Because I went to the opening of one in Reseda, and people were out, residents were protesting.
Yeah. Well, again, I think the reason they're protesting is because, unfortunately, and I have a broken heart about this, we are spending far too much money per unit, up to $840,000 per unit for a studio unit. One project will open with $1 million units, and when those $1 million units open, alcohol and drugs and gang activity will freely flow. And I know policymakers think that somehow the drug trade is innocent and victimless and nonviolent, but that's not the way it works. I was walking down the streets and a guy comes running out of a building downtown and says, "Who are you guys?" And I told him who we were. He said, "If you want to do something, stop the drug gangs from moving into our apartments, kicking us out and selling drugs from our apartments." Anita, I only tweeted this, right? What I heard and what I saw. The activists on Skid Row told me I was demonizing gang members. A gang across the street came over and warned our dock worker to tell his boss to shut up about us. And that night I had the commander of the police in my office watching the drug trade, and they not only caught the drug trade, but the supplier, because that's the reality of the streets.
It's a multi-pronged issue, homelessness. Yes. You talked about the activists, and the activists were very upset that the city just passed a new law, a resolution banning encampments from within 500 feet of schools and daycare centers. What are your thoughts on that?
I understand their frustration because our city and county get warned by a judge to immediately provide shelter and housing to everybody on the streets of Skid Row. What do? We don't comply. We go to court, and then meanwhile, a near billionaire shows up and convinces the city to immediately start criminalizing encampments. Well, that's not the answer either. We need to both immediately shelter and house, and we need to start enforcing encampments once we've created enough shelter and housing for people. We never do that. We always jump right to the enforcement encampments, but I do agree we have to clean up encampments around schools. We have to protect kids. Even the superintendent of LAUSD schools showed up and talked about what dangers and what what
that the children
unfortunate
face just
education that they're
walking
facing.
to school.
Yeah, they're learning things they should never have to face.
In terms of the people at the mission, do you have a number, a percentage of them that move to permanent housing eventually?
Yes, since we created the Gateway program, which teaches responsibility, helps people with budgeting, we were averaging about 900 people per year moving into housing out of, let's say, 1,000 a night. But now that we're about half of that, I believe we hit about 450 people. And that may seem small, but it's working. When we set up Hope Gardens, we know moms are moving not only from Hope Gardens into permanent housing, but they're saving between $12,000 and $17,000 before they move out and are able to get a job and move out, never to experience homelessness again. Even our Gateway program, our Step Up Shelter program, people can stay as long as it takes to get on their feet. And if they have an income, we ask them to pay $150 per month. That's free room and board and 3 meals a day and clinics and learning center and all kinds of opportunities. 24/7, they have the shelter bed. They can rest during the day, never have to leave. I went back to my early days of running a mission because I learned everything I learned from a man who had a 4th grade education, George Holloway, and he believed people feel better about themselves if they live in a sober environment. In fact, he thought the only way to get sober was to be in a sober environment. They feel better about themselves when the food is good, and they feel much better about themselves when they pay part of their own way. And this is part of someone. It's about 1/5 of what it takes to house and feed somebody a day. So they pay part of their own way, and it teaches ownership and budgeting responsibility.
That's really interesting. You told me a few years ago that you had a staph infection in one of your legs. That was from Skid Row, correct?
Yes, this right leg, I had a wound. I got a kidney transplant. My wife gave me her kidney on Valentine's Day, and I got in the habit of walking. I set every record for walking at the hospital. So I signed my wife and I up for a small triathlon. 5 weeks after our kidney transplant, we did the triathlon, and I got a blister from doing the triathlon. Well, I was trying to heal a wound that had developed from that blister, and it was almost healed. But in my wound boot, I was out doing a water walk, and I came in contact with human waste on the streets of Skid Row. And I got 3 flesh-eating diseases, E. coli, staph, and strep. And it began, I went in the hospital for that for 4 days, 104 temperature, blood poisoning, and I came out in a wheelchair. Then, living with one leg, wore out my other leg, and I had to lose this last year. I didn't share that story for about a year because I was worried, because my board often gets nervous when I share health stories and they start a succession plan. But I knew at the time that the city might be alerted to something if I shared what happened to me. And so I shared the story, and it made the downtown news and several other stories about me getting a flesh-eating disease from the streets of Skid Row from human waste. At that time, there were 2,800 people sharing 9 toilets, 184 toilets shy of a minimum standard for a Syrian refugee camp. If that's, I mean, that's the way Skid Row compares to the rest of the world. There are more people now, double or more people now, only a few more toilets now, so we still have a human tragedy happening on Skid Row.
I'm just amazed that you are able to stay motivated with the despair that you see on a daily basis, what you've been through, and yet you continue to work towards helping the homeless. So we applaud you and we thank you.
I do that because of the lives change that I see every day, brand new lives, people overcoming addictions, living a new life. It's worth every effort.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Reverend Andy Bales. This is LA Currents. I'm Anita Bennett. Thank you for watching and have a great day.